I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today is a big day for a big vehicle here in Australia. And that vehicle is this, the MG U9, MG's version of the LDV Terron 9, a car that launched here in Australia last month. But I'd probably suggest the version wearing the MG badge is going to be instantly more recognisable to more Australians. Now, MG has been super ambitious the last few years here in Australia. Chinese brand, bought an old British name. They want to be a top 5 car seller here in Australia within the next few years. Having a ute is necessary if you want to be top 5 in this country. That's what MG thinks, at least. Enter the U9. It's got a 2.5 litre turbo diesel engine, but it's actually rather unlike vehicles like the Toyota Hilux and Ford Ranger. There's a big difference, which I'll explain in this video. I'll also tell you the price of this ute when we jump inside. We'll check out the front seat, back seat, have a look at the tray, discuss the running costs, and go for our first drive in this vehicle, at least in this controlled area, because it is still technically pre-production. Can't take it on the road today, but that will be happening in the near future. Before we get started, hit subscribe below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. When I arrived at this sort of pre-drive event for the MG U9 this morning, I did not know the price of this vehicle. In fact, it was only announced by MG Australia's CEO over lunch, and I think it's fair to say the company's pretty proud of where they've landed, and there was negotiation up to the last second with China. Pricing starts at $52,990 drive away for the base model U9, and this one is $60,990 for the all singing, all dancing U9 Explore Pro, and that is a drive away price. And the specification is pretty decent. The car is well equipped with only a few strange quirks, like the fact that only the driver's seat is cooled in the car. The front passenger seat is not cooled, it's only heated. But in this top spec version, there's heated seats all round in the cabin, which is pretty nice. All models get twin 12.3-inch screens up here on the dash with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and some hard keys for things that you'd want, like fan speed, temperature, dual zone climate here up front, low range transfer case, locking diffs front and rear, and this pretty cool aircraft style selector for the ZF built 8-speed automatic transmission. Ergonomics are also okay. The powered driver's seat has 12 ways of adjustment, so you can adjust for your under thigh. 4-way lumbar is nice, leather steering wheel out in front of us, and the screens sit very low in the dash, so they're not actually in your way. We sit high with a good view out, big mirrors, big glass house, and a digital rear view mirror here. There's also some interesting touches like this faux suede headliner and a huge panoramic sunroof, the kinds of things that you only see in those top-end American pickups. That being said, scratch below the surface, and while everything is seemingly covered in soft touch materials, which is amazing compared to the likes of a Hilux or Triton or Navara, it's not a luxury vehicle, nor is MG saying that it needs to be. A lot of the sort of actual quality underneath the skin feels more budget than plush, but at this price, that's okay. Storage, pretty good. Large cup holders, big thing between the seats with a little coin holder here, okay sized door bins that'll take a big bottle, quite a few Jesus handles throughout the car if you need to hang on tight. So while there are a couple of holes in the spec sheet here and there, frankly the U9 is landing at a very competitive position. However, there is one problem with this interior, which I'll explain when we jump in the back seat. Well, the problem certainly isn't second row space. Compared to many utes, the U9 is downright spacious and accommodating in row 2. Legroom's excellent for myself at 6 foot. Headroom's very good too. There's almost a little cutout in the roof to give you headroom despite the sunroof. Toe room's a bit odd because the pleather cover for the seat goes really low, but there's a completely flat floor. Well done, MG. So you could get someone here in the center. Air vents, USBs, rear heated seats, even soft touch materials, they're all here in the back of the U9. You'd have to say it is glitzy, this interior. But unfortunately, the build quality hasn't been right in the U9s that I've driven and sat in today. You can see it in the wavy stitching on the seats, that's just a bit sloppy. More concerning is that the vehicle has a lot of creaks and rattles and squeaks going through a bunch of the off-road obstacles here. Now, it's a dual cab ute and it's also 61k drive away. So trust me, I am tempering my expectations, and some rivals are also not built that well. But very keen to get final production versions of the U9 out onto the road to see how they are built, because technically MG can still hide behind the excuse that these are kind of very late stage pre-production. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Moving around the back of the U9 now, a word on styling. Clearly this vehicle is closely related to the LDV Terron 9. They look similar, but frankly the shape is quite appealing. MG have decided to go for squared off and quite conventional, rather different to the likes of the Kia Tasman. You can let me know what you think of the aesthetic of the U9 down below this video. Physically, it's also relatively large. I'll put the dimensions on screen now, showing you how big the U9 is compared to the country's best-selling ute, which is currently the Ford Ranger. Now, an interesting thing about this vehicle, as we mentioned in the back, is it is actually not a conventional pickup in the sense of being body on frame. This is unibody, like a Land Rover Defender or something like that, so it's more like a car than it is a ute. And one thing that that lets you do is, not that, although this is a cool feature of the U9, which is this little sort of twin piece tailgate with a step here, nicely damped as it opens. But you can actually open up a Midgate on the U9, which lets you put super long stuff in the tray. You can also drive it with the window open in the back like it is now. Now putting all of this back up, this part's not assisted, but it's light enough. Most people will be able to do it. In terms of key weights and things like that, like GVM, GCM, payload, let's go to a voiceover of me now. MG released key weights and measurements for the U9 after I filmed this video, but we know them now. Ground clearance is pretty low at 220 mils or 180 under max load, but the claimed angles are 29-degree approach, 25-degree departure. Tare weight is between 2,398 and 2,498 kilos, depending on trim, with 3,320 kilo GVM and 6,500 kilo GCM across the range, as well as 3,500 kilo towing. Payload is between 770 and 870 kilos, leaving 420 to 520 kilos of payload when towing on the limit. That said, we recommend limiting your towing with these sorts of vehicles to 3,000 kilos. So, just getting our first relatively slow drive of the MG U9. Why are we here in the bush? Well, partially because MG knows that it needs to talk up the off-roading credibility of this ute, because the U9, unlike virtually every rival, this is a unibody vehicle, so more like a modern Land Rover Defender than it is similar to a Hilux or a Ranger. Almost every vehicle in this segment is body on frame, partially because of the additional off-roading ability that can give, but doesn't always. The U9, just like the LDV Terron 9 that it shares its platform with, is unibody, and that's what lets you have cool features like the optional Midgate. It's also got multi-link independent rear suspension. Now that can help off-road, but it's particularly meant for on-roading refinement, and that's something we'll be testing another day. Why is that? Well, I've been told these vehicles are pre-production, which means it wouldn't be legal for me, as someone that isn't a engineer for MG, to drive it on the road. Hence why the company's brought us here to Glenworth Valley, which does have some pretty cool and occasionally gnarly pre-formed off-roading trails and water crossings and stuff to have a first experience of the car. So I've got the U9 in 4 low and with both diffs locked at the moment, and just descending into a pretty narrow little water crossing. Only 550 mil wading depth in this vehicle, which is pretty low for the class, but we've got a cool sensor on the screen which shows you exactly where the water's up to, which is interesting. You know, triple locked and 4 low is probably overkill for that, but the MG trainers are kind of keen to get us to interact with all the features of the car, and yeah, made light of it. Look, these ones that I'm driving now, these are actually on the accessory all-terrain tire as well. Standard rim, all-terrain tire, and yeah, walked a shallow crossing there. But actually quite easy technology to interact with in terms of low range, diff locks, drive mode, really nice toggle down here, and clear displays that kind of aren't overwhelming, but just show you what you need right now, which is cool. Good cameras too. Still, it's a valuable early experience of getting to spend time in the U9, ride in it, check out the interior as we already have done, but also come to grips with how this vehicle does drive off-road, and at least at low speeds. And so far, I'm moderately impressed with a couple of caveats. As I come into a slightly gnarlier, very dark water crossing here, let's get through this one. It's just in 4 high at the moment. There we go, a little bit of extra power, get through that. You can hear the diesel engine working away. It's a 2.5 litre turbo diesel 4-cylinder, 160 kilowatts of power, so class competitive. Those are the numbers you're getting out of Hilux, Ranger 4-cylinder diesels, but some way off the V6 diesels that you can get in Ranger and Amarok, and obviously a lot less than the plug-in hybrid options in this segment. Speaking of plug-in hybrid, MG is actively exploring turning the U9 into a hybrid, and it's only just launched in diesel form. An electric U9 is available overseas in the form of the LDV Terron 9, but frankly, MG Australia executives are just not convinced there's a market for that vehicle yet. I was told the U9 has got to be profitable, and the implication was that the full EV simply wouldn't be, so hence diesel for now. But here in Australia, where our emissions regulations are now in force and getting tighter very quickly every year out to 2029, this vehicle will simply have to be hybridized at some point. So watch this space. For now, the diesel is unremarkable. NVH is decent. It's a relatively quiet unit. Under load, it does get noticeably more vibey, however. But in just your general driving, it feels like it's got relatively plentiful torque. It's a bit quieter than like a Hilux 2.8 diesel, I would say. And it's hooked up to a ZF torque converter 8-speed automatic. So if you're a subscriber, you'll know that I've wrung my hands many times in the past with dodgy automatic transmissions developed by car manufacturers, and I've said, why don't you just buy an off-the-shelf ZF 8-speed? Well, clearly MG was listening, because that's what they've done here. And at least at low speed, the tuning feels okay. Obviously keen to take this car for a extended road drive to really see how it is at higher speeds and in the corners. Speaking of cornering, the steering is nice and slow, which is really what you want off-road, so you can place the car easily. We'll see if that changes at all at higher speed in our next review of this car. But ride quality is really what MG says they want the U9's standout driving experience to be. It's unibody, it's got the multi-link independent rear suspension, and the CEO of MG Australia has decried the fact that Australians have to put up with really poor ride quality in most mid-size pickups, and that's absolutely true. I completely agree, and from what I can feel here on this kind of stuff, the ride does feel more compliant than most utes, so I'm looking forward to testing that properly on my own roads outside of a controlled environment like this. But the early signs are good. How the U9 stands up to higher speed bumps and more difficult situations remains to be seen, but here, sort of below about 40-50 kilometers per hour, in and out of big chunky potholes, feels nice and compliant, nice and rounded off on the suspension, particularly at the back, which is where most utes really struggle. Now naturally, there's a little bit less payload capacity in the U9 as a result, but it's not way off the pace, and it's more payload than you get in a Prado or a 300 series or something like that, which is good. One caveat about the driving experience though is that MG has talked up the rigidity of the U9, mostly because it's a unibody vehicle, so it should be way more rigid than most of the frame vehicles in this segment. They've said there's no flex off-roading or next to no flex, and for the body that seems right based on what I've done, but when you have no flex in the body or the chassis, where you typically get flex off-road is in the cabin. And this interior is full of stuff, as we checked out before, and it is all creaking when you take this vehicle for a drive. Like you go through one dip, one ford, something where you're twisting the body of the U9, you can hear it all through the dash making terrible creaking noises, even with very low mileage on this particular test vehicle. The other impression that you get from the U9 when you're driving around is that it is big, and the dimensions are larger than typical for this part of the ute segment. You're going to want to check that you can park this at home, that you're happy with the size. Personally, I like it as kind of a halfway house between a Ranger and an F-150, but the size isn't going to be for everybody. So what's my early verdict on the MG U9, at least after getting to pore over the vehicle in static form today and take it for a careful drive in various off-road situations? Acknowledging I haven't yet driven it on-road and I have to keep my final verdict until that point, I would say my first impressions are relatively strong, mostly because MG has done the right thing by keeping the price of the U9 realistic for an untested vehicle. It is their first proper ute for Australia, and pricing this top spec version at $60,990 seems fair to me for a vehicle we've never heard of. Quite different in execution to the Kia Tasman, which is priced way up into the upper 70s drive away for, again, an untested vehicle in that sense. That said, I've got some concerns about the U9. Interior quality doesn't seem quite up to scratch with the best in the segment. Lots of rattles and squeaks in the cars that I drove today. We're of course yet to see a proper teardown and a proper torture test off-road, and whether or not the unibody format will really work for that. And of course we're yet to drive it on-road. But some of the early signs are good. The ride seems compliant, the diesel seems pretty inoffensive, the styling and the interior are okay for a budget ute, and that price is compelling. We will be doing a full test of the U9 soon. Ensure you subscribe so you don't miss that. But for now, let me know your initial impressions down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.